Welcome, everyone, to Murmurations, a new monthly Zoom conversation series by and for women artists. Aim Higher is a new nonprofit with a mission to help women artists sow paths to success by supplying the support, opportunities, and community needed to live a self-sustaining creative life. I'm Lissa Kiernan, the founder of Aim Higher, and I'm joined in hosting today by Josh Davis, a member of our board of directors. Our guests are the sister artist, novelist, and poet Kathleen Rooney and writer and photojournalist Beth Rooney. Thank you both for coming. They will each have 15 minutes to present to you, and then we'll dive into conversation, ending with a Q&A with you, our fabulous audience. Up until that time, if you could please make sure your microphone is muted so that we have the best possible audio experience. We do have a very full program for you today. So I think we're going to just dive right in. I'm going to introduce Beth Rooney first and talk about her photography series. And Kathleen will follow up with a chapter from her best-selling novel, Lillian Bach's Takes a Walk. So welcome everybody again to this first Zoom Murmuration in the new Aim Higher series. Great. All right, Beth Rooney is a photographer and a writer who lives in Oak Park with a growing menagerie of people, pets, and plants. When she's not creating, she can be found in her native garden. Her work has been published in the Chicago Chef's Table and was a featured photographer in the book Lens on Life. Her past and current clients include Morning Calm, the Chicago Tribune, Wire, The Atlantic, the New York Times, Chicago Public Radio, and the University of Chicago, among others. Her ultimate goal is to tell stories with a strong narrative and a vibrant, thoughtful aesthetic. And judging from the work we'll be viewing today, I would say she is succeeding. Beth, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited. And I can't believe all the Martas and Margarets that are on this.
I know,
Zoom.
right?
It's awesome. It's not a super common name, but I'm glad to see it. But yes, thank you for the lovely introduction and thanks for having us.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you here. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Okay.
And share your beautiful photography with our guests. Does that sound good?
Yes, definitely. Right. Okay, there she is. That's Gandalf.
The one you were just telling
us.
That's
the one I was just telling you guys about.
Tell us more.
So this project is right now it's called Gray, and it's an exploration of why women choose to let their hair naturally age along with the rest of their bodies or choose to dye their hair, and what that implication means, like what that decision is in terms of your relationships with others, with work, lovers, kids, your place in the world, and like the broader implications of those decisions. So it's been, I've been working on it honestly since 2019, but obviously the pandemic made things a little weird and kind of put things on pause for a little while. It changed the conversation. Like I continued the project, but people obviously had other things on their minds. So the interviews during the pandemic, I don't feel are quite as rich as the ones before and now on this, like since the summer. But I've been kind of collecting stories from women throughout the Chicagoland area primarily. I have a couple of people from New York, but for the most part, I've been talking to women age 20 to age 80 about their decisions. And I don't know if you guys can read it. I'm not sure how big your screens are, but a big part of this project is the quote, the story that the women tell me while we have our time together. And usually, you know, it depends, sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes a couple hours, depending on how talkative and open people are. So Laura she's a sculptor, muralist, and an instructor in Indiana. And I don't know if you guys, do you want me to just read it, the quote, or should I just kind of, do you want to zoom through a few?
Read it, Beth, and give you
if you'd like to.
Sure. I noticed when I was just 16 years old, I got really close to the mirror to put my mascara on. What I thought was sunshine was literally a fresh streak slash patch of white hair. I was instantly shocked, terrified, mortified. I thought, how is this happening? So that day after school, I went and got hair dye, Clairol Soft Brown, 1993. And that was the beginning of a never-ending saga. I went from dyeing it every other week to every few days. I was fighting nature and it was exhausting. About 2 years ago, I noticed a change in my internal dialogue. It went from positive, girl, you look good, you are getting your stuff together, to look at all this gray, you better cover it up. Are you going to do something about it? And then finally, this beautiful voice said, yeah, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to let it grow all out. And she has this beautiful violet silver color, doesn't she?
Yeah, she kind of plays with the colors, more than some of the other women in the series do, but she puts it like on the crown and then throughout, and it's dye that only lasts about 3 or 4 days and then it washes out. So it's not the like intense chemical dyes she was using up until a few years ago. And I think for her and for a lot of these women, I heard again and again the refrain of like women who had been tying their hair, like the feeling of relief and the feeling of power that they get back when they stop dyeing their hair. And then you can either go forward or backward, either way. I think forward, if you go like back to the beginning, or here, you can kind of see her like unicorn hair in that one.
Oh yeah. Beautiful.
And she just is owning the silver. And part of the reason this project started, it was inspired by Rose, my daughter, who's featured in This Is Why We're Late as well. I had been dyeing my hair red because Kathleen and I and our husbands went as David Bowie from different eras in 2016. So I had dyed my hair red to be Ziggy Stardust. And then I just was kind of having fun with it. But eventually I wanted to stop, and like I noticed the grays coming in. And my daughter was very, very disturbed. And she looked at my head and was like, Mama, are you going to dye? Because she saw the gray and she associated it with being like really, really, really old. And so she thought I was going to die soon because my hair was gray. So it started a conversation between myself and Rose, and then just kind of opened up to this dialogue between myself and Kathleen. We talked quite a bit about it. And then just these internal questions became this bigger question for the world, and just like what's behind this. I think a lot of my projects start that way, as a question I have or something I find interesting and worth note, and then talking about it in a visual way, and then just spending time, hours with these fantastic, strong, amazing women, and digging deeper into what is motivating everyone.
Yeah. Would you have one you'd like me to navigate to next to talk about?
I can't remember the order they're in. I feel like if you go to the beginning, I think Kathleen's photos more in the beginning. You can just keep going to previous.
Okay.
There's Laura, and there's me. That was really hard. Self-portraiture is not my thing. And so these, I think I did but the pandemic gave me lots and lots of opportunities to play around with all kinds of different photography, and self-portraiture became one of them. So that's my photo. And this is Marcella. Her quote is incredibly powerful. She's a photographer. She said, I started going gray when I was 25. It made me sad, but I knew I could count on the coloring process. I started coloring my hair every 6 weeks or more. Now it's every 3 weeks. I am a slave. So she recognizes that this is no longer her decision, but she feels that she can't get off that train.
Mm-hmm. She's 48 and she's been gray since she was 25, and she does, wow.
Yeah, so it's a long time. It's a lot of these, the reasons are so varied and interesting about, why they're choosing to color or choosing not to.
Right. And I mean, I've colored my hair a few times. I mean, to me, it's just such a uncomfortable experience because of the fumes and the smell.
Yeah.
It's just like, it feels very like unhealthy. And I just feel like at some point, like I stopped doing my own because it was too noxious, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
I went to the
totally.
hairdresser and had it done, and I did start going naturally gray a while ago. And then recently, I had to go down and help my mom in Florida, and I went to a beauty salon in Florida that had very different interpretations of a few highlights than I did. But yeah, yeah. Mm,
And this is Kathleen. She's a nurse practitioner. She
yeah.
had a really interesting story. She was dyeing her hair and continued to dye it because she was worried about ageism. She was applying for different jobs and she was very concerned about not getting hired if she didn't look young enough. And then finally the pandemic hit and she just said, I don't have time for this. Like I can't, she needs to care for her patients, for my family, that kind
Yeah.
of thing, instead of just her highlights. Um, and what other people thought of her youth or lack of youth in this,
Yeah, she says, my focus became taking care of my family and my patients, both physically and emotionally. Meticulously doing my roots every 3 weeks just didn't seem that important to me anymore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty to the point, right? Like it cuts to the chase. But yeah, so it's an ongoing series. I've got more images that I just haven't had a chance to put up yet. And I'm going to continue working on it. I'm in the process now of submitting and pulling together the different applications for grants and exhibition proposals with an editor friend of ours, Kathleen and mine, who really pushed me to do it. And again, speaking to women artists, she saw a lot of potential in a story, in a project that I would have given up on several times already, if not for that support from Kim and from Kathleen. I mean, and just that it speaks to how important it is to have that network of, and especially women, with a project like this about women and the implications for women of this standard. And so I really feel very lucky to have that network of people to help support and keep me going on long-term projects like this. It's easy to lose your focus.
Yeah, absolutely. No pun intended, huh?
Yes.
I'm gonna move over now.
Yeah, please. Yeah, pun is always intended.
Okay. Because we're so tight on time, I'm gonna move along.
Yes.
But y'all, I'm gonna put her website URL into the chat, and you can go peruse all of the photographs. They're fabulous.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So this, do I have a few minutes? I haven't been watching the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear about it. This is
So
why we are late.
This Is Why We Were Late is like the first autobiographical piece I kind of did. And it was born out of pure frustration as a mom of two young children. Trying to get anywhere was like so hard. So one day Rose was sitting outside of her school and she was super cold and it was Valentine's Day. If you keep going, I think you'll see the photo. And she was like distraught. She wouldn't go inside even though she was cold. And I was trying to argue with her to get her to go inside and be like logical about it. But there's no point in trying to be logical with like illogical toddlers. So I decided I could either be, here's the photo coming up, either be super frustrated. Yeah, so there's Luca, there's Rose. She wouldn't go inside. So instead of like arguing with her further, I just took a photo. And this is like the beginning of This Is Why We're Late. So it's these ephemeral moments of, these fleeting moments of childhood where like she's not like that anymore. It's 2021, so now she's 10, she's in 5th grade, everything changes. But in the moment when you're going through this, you feel like you're never going to get anywhere ever again, and that your life is always going to be someone else's, and that's not true at all. And now you look back and sometimes I see photos of Luca and I'm like, oh, we should have another one, and they're like, no, it's a trap. Like don't do it. But they're so sweet, and I'm so happy to have these photos where if I hadn't been a photographer, if I hadn't really been thinking that way, I might just have been a very frustrated mother instead of having this beautiful document that speaks to my family, but also speaks to the larger parent experience, young children.
Yeah, I see Josh nodding his head vigorously. I think he has a 4 or 5-year-old, I believe, and I'm sure he can relate. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And
So,
they're all with my phone because especially when they were younger, you're always like carrying something or needing to go chase them or whatever, and you need to be super mobile. So my like heavy DSLR is just, it's not reasonable. It's like having a third child. So I would frequently leave that home and just always have my phone, because it's always there, and it kind of, so like the idiosyncratic like framing that you see in some of these photos is like the app that you use, and it kind of again just mirrors the weird world of children, and make believe and what they find fascinating.
right.
um,
Well, it
like
has a very spontaneous quality. Yeah. And
thank
you
you.
don't do much in post, as they say, with the photos.
No, these are all like, they're kind of like, from the camera, just processed through that, like I think it was what's it called, Kathleen? I don't have it anymore.
It's the Hipstamatic app.
Hipstamatic, yeah, because I had Apple and now I don't have Apple, so now it's something vignette. But anyway, yeah, it's just like whatever the camera does to it. Again, kind of surrendering control the way you have to surrender control when you have young children,
Right.
or any children, I imagine. As they get older, I don't know how much control I have.
Yeah. Rose runs through the yard in her pajamas as we try to hurry to the conservatory before it closes. It's just was she supposed to be taking some kind of music lesson, or?
We just always go to the conservatory on New Year's Day because it's so cold in Chicago, and it's somewhere where we can go and like run off some energy on a cold wintry day. And
yeah, it's a plant conservatory.
Yeah, a plant conservatory.
Okay, yeah, I thought a music conservatory. Being raised a musician, that's where my mind went.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and my plant, I'm always thinking of plants.
Yeah. It actually looks like a studio photograph to me. It's just gorgeous. The depth and variations of saturations in it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, look at those little boots.
Yeah, and some of the why we're late was like tantrums, and some of it was like her reading, so you don't want to interrupt, but at the same time you're like, we gotta go, like right. we have to shift gears. Just kind of always, life is always moving.
And what's going on here?
Oh, and this is, yeah, one more page. They're just reading. They look at these, I make these photo albums every year, and I think they're looking at like our family photo albums. And then Luca is still obsessed with trains, my younger son. He loves trains. I
love the meta quality of a photo where the subject is looking at photos,
right, of themselves.
Photos of themselves, right? Yeah, that's a classic. Oh, that's just gorgeous. Where is this? Croatia.
Yeah, my husband's family is all in Croatia, so we go, every other summer-ish. So we were on our way back to his little village, and she wiped out and was throwing a tantrum about going back, but also didn't want to stay there, and it was too far, but she didn't want to move. And same thing as in the US, just with a prettier background.
Well, that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Beth. And is there anything, any photo you want to touch on before we move on? Or?
I think that's probably all. I think we're good. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch, and you could scroll through, but I want to make sure we give Kathleen time too.
Oh yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. Your work is just rich and thoughtful, and it's the perfect subject matter for this series, I feel like.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, this next one cracks me up. Luca always plays hide and seek and doesn't tell us. Was like his favorite thing in the whole world to do. So he was in a locker at an ice rink, and like, just because. So I was kind of borderline panicked. And then his little friend found him. So.
And on that note, I'm going to stop my screen share. I hate to click away from that adorable face. Oh my goodness. Okay. Thank you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
Bye. So moving right along, Kathleen Rooney, I'm going to pin her. I think that's okay. Kathleen Rooney is a founding editor of Rose Middle Press, a nonprofit publisher of literary work and hybrid genres, as well as a founding member of Poems While You Wait, where they type poems on the spot for demanding people who want them. Her most recent books include the novel Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk and the World War I beautiful cover novel Share Me and Major Whittlesey, published by Penguin in 2020. Her criticism appears in the New York Times Magazine, the Poetry Foundation website, the Chicago Tribune, the Brooklyn Rail, the Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. She lives in Chicago with her spouse, the writer Martin Say, and teaches at DePaul. Welcome, Kathleen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor.
Well, it's our pleasure. I'm just thrilled to have the two of you here. Kathleen, you told me you're going to read chapter 3 from Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna, since I want to make sure we have plenty of time for it, because your questions are so good and it's already 4:22, I was just gonna read the preface and
Yes.
say a few words, if that's okay, if I go rogue. Like, one of my superpowers as a teacher is time management, so
Totally.
changing it
Yeah.
up on the fly. So should I just jump right in?
Yes, you should. Except let me give the people in the audience a little bit of an introduction to
Yeah.
this wonderful feminist heroine character, Lillian Boxfish. Boxfish is an 85-year-old woman who took 1930s New York by storm, working her way up writing copy for R.H. Macy's to become the highest paid advertising woman in the country. So she was a mad woman, not a madman. And it's based on a real life ad woman and author, Margaret Fishback, a woman who tried and succeeded in making it in what was a man's profession. The book has won seemingly every award. And on that note, I'll let Kathleen and her superpowers take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, so that pretty much covers it. I think the other thing to know is that the book has kind of a split structure where part of it takes place in 1984, like New Year's Eve. So it's about to be 1985. And so New York City is kind of like under the threat of the Bernie Goetz shooting, the subway vigilante. And so I'll just read sort of like the preface, but I wanted to show, if you like books that have maps in them, this is a book that has a map. I'm a sucker for a book with a map, so just shout out to St. Martin's for being awesome and going with my sort of design desires. So this is just the preface before we get into the story, and it's called The Road of Anthracite, because all of the chapters have titles. And then something else that I always like to point out is my book has a dedication to two people, because I wrote the book, but the inspiration comes from all over. And so it says, for Angela, my archivist always, and for Eric, forever my favorite flaneur. And those are kind of the two threads that came together to become this book, where Angela is my best friend from high school. She introduced me to Martin, my spouse. I mean, she's like one of these angel friends. And so she was the first archivist to work with Margaret Fishback, who, Lissa, you mentioned, her archive at Duke University. And she told me about Margaret, so shout out to her. And then my friend Eric is my colleague at DePaul and the co-founder of Poems While You Wait. And I've always loved walking. I've always considered myself a flaneuse, a walker in the city. And he kind of helped me see how walkable Chicago was. Like, I was used to walking in Boston and Washington, DC and Oxford, like smaller places. And he just like opened Chicago to me. So I gave Lillian, the fictional version of Margaret, my own love of Flannery. So just like to give credit where it's due. So The Road of Anthracite. There once was a girl named Phoebe Snow. She wore only white and held tight to a violet corsage, an emblem of modesty. She was not retiring though, and her life spun out as a series of journeys through mountain tunnels carved from poetry. I never saw her doing anything besides boarding, riding, or disembarking a train, immaculate always, captivating the conductors, enchanting other passengers. No, there wasn't. She was just an advertisement, the poster girl for the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western Railroad. Her unsoilable Antarctic colored clothes were proof that the line's anthracite-powered locomotives were clean burning, truly, unlike their sooty and outfit despoiling competitors. Her laundry bill for fluff and frill Miss Phoebe finds is nearly nil. It's always light, though gowns of white are worn on road of anthracite. I was 5 years old when I first laid eyes on her, on a postcard sent me by my dearest aunt, Sadie Boxfish, my father's youngest sister, daring and unmarried and living in Manhattan. Sadie visited us in the District of Columbia, but not very often. Her rare physical presence she supplemented with correspondence and snips and flashes. After I scrawled back how much I adored Phoebe, star of the story poems, they became the only kind of cards Sadie ever posted. The earliest ones my mother read aloud, though I could read. Miss Phoebe Snow has stopped to show her ticket at the gate, you know. The guard, polite, declares it right. Of course, it's road of anthracite. Mother clutched me in her lap, talking about the image. Phoebe in a hat, Phoebe in a dining car, Phoebe blue-eyed and mannerly chatting with the engineer, and reciting the poetry. Here Phoebe may, by night or day, enjoy her book upon the way. Electric light dispels the night upon the road of anthracite. In her clear contralto above my ears, I could hear. In her neat bosom behind my head, I could feel her disapproval, not of Phoebe, but of Sadie. My mother, who was well educated, read widely, passably fluent in German, conversant with the works of Freud and Adler, married at 20 and never received $1 of wages in her life, was also a woman who took difference as a slight. Anyone not living a life that fit the mold of her own, wifedom, motherhood, constituted a personal affront, an implied rebuke, an argument against. I thought Sadie quite bold. What a smart girl, my mother would say of Phoebe, who, I saw later, must have been so light and unburdened for having only air and not one thought or care in her golden head. Mother, stroking my own red gold hair, meant only that Phoebe's frock was smart, or her little white gloves, not Phoebe herself, not smartness of that kind. Aunt Sadie's a smart girl, I said only once, to no reply. To my mother, gritting her small, neat teeth, pearly and needle-like, reading that day's card more loudly than usual. A cozy seat, a dainty treat, make Phoebe's happiness complete, with linen white and silver bright upon the road of anthracite. Sadie, career girl, and Phoebe, socialite, embedded inextricably into one another in my mind. Both of them expressed the inexpressible, suggesting that sex appeal existed, but probably ought not to be named while one was living at home, suggesting not so much a passenger train as speed and freedom, not so much a gown as style, not so much a hairdo as beauty. Mother saw Sadie as wasting that last, working as hard as a beast of burden as a nurse in a hospital in New York City. Though now I know that Sadie can't have been living the life of Riley, I wanted to move there and join her. What a smart girl. My mother resented Sadie like a stepsister resenting Cinderella, but she was polite. She did her no social violence, was always hospitable and gracious on Sadie's visits, both as a point of pride and because my father would not have abided otherwise, though he too, a lawyer, thought Sadie's work beneath her. My devotion to both Phoebe and Sadie has remained constant over the decades. When I think of either, I also think of lofty mountain chains and cool delights. The New York I moved to eventually was empty of Sadie, though I've since walked by St. Vincent's, the hospital where she worked, I don't know how many times. She died in the influenza epidemic of 1918. Phoebe, deathless, simply faded from the public consciousness like a once popular song. Anthracite, needed to fight the Great War, was not to be used on railroads anymore. The world changed and Phoebe disappeared forever. On time, the trip ends without a slip and Phoebe sadly takes her grip, loath to alight, bows left and right. Goodbye, dear road of anthracite. But I never forgot her. I didn't want to be her, so much as to have her, to create her. Sadie led me to Manhattan, but Phoebe led me to poetry and to advertising. So enwrapped was I at her entrancing rhymes that when the time came to apply for jobs, I rhymed my letters and my samples alike. To work for you is my fondest wish, signed your ever true Lillian Boxfish. 15 inquiries, 5 favorable replies, including one by telegram from R.H. Macy's. This was the one I chose, my first serious job in New York City. A job which in some ways saved my life and in other ways ruined it. What a smart girl.
Thank you, Kathleen. Just wonderful.
Thank you.
You. If you haven't read Lillian Boxfish, yeah, I highly recommend it. One of the things that amazes me, having, I moved to New York City, a small town girl from Massachusetts, and you capture the city just so beautifully. And R.H. Macy's, like my college roommate, that was his first job, in New York City too. It's just iconic. You just captured it. I don't think you've ever lived there.
No, I never have. I think in a weird way, and thank you for saying that. It always, I love all compliments, but compliments from people who actually lived in New York are especially moving because, yeah, I never lived there. And I think it was weirdly to my advantage because I wasn't writing about New York now or anytime most of my readers would have lived there, at least not, most people alive didn't live in New York in the 20s. So, or the 30s. So it kept me extremely rigorous and meticulous in my research. And the book came out in 2017. And so far, this could be a challenge to everyone on this Zoom. No one has found any mistakes. So I feel like I nailed it from a anachronism perspective, which feels good.
Nailed it. Totally nailed it. Congrats.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's a good segue into the Q&A portion of our Murmuration, in which we talked to Beth and Rooney about being sisters, about being artists. And I know Beth actually did live in New York, and I was wondering if she was a source for you. But I think
I never lived in New York. I lived in LA.
Okay.
Yeah, but not New York. So
okay.
I go there a lot because that's where a lot of editors are, but and I work there a lot because again, there's a lot of work in New York, but no.
Okay. My bad. But
no, it's okay.
You did a lot of work in television, right?
It's primarily still. I've started to do a lot more video because people are asking for it. So as a working photographer, you kind of sometimes do what you're asked, not necessarily what you're trained at. So just kind of have to learn on the fly. But yeah, no, you give me more credit than I deserve in terms of my career. Thank you.
Now you're being modest. Like little Lillian.
Yeah.
I think Joshua has come up with some fabulous questions. So take it away, Josh, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Lissa. I'd like to begin by thanking you both, Beth and Kathleen, for being with us. This is wonderful. And I have to tell you that after a full day of high school teaching, the prospect of getting on Zoom can seem kind of harrowing, but this is energizing and reinvigorating. So thank you so much.
Good.
I wanted to begin by asking you if there are other famous sisters or siblings who write and who make art whose example inspires you or to whom you feel connected. So some people who came to mind were Virginia Woolf and Vanessa Bell, the Brontes, the Rossettis. Maybe if you're feeling acrimonious, A.S. Byatt and Margaret Drabble.
Yeah, I love this question. And I think all of those are on the list. But for me, I think I admire and kind of feel like Beth and I are sort of more similar to the sisters who founded Rodarte, the fashion label, and who now are doing designing. It's interesting, they're doing costumes, but for animated movies, which is cool, kids movies. And I like how they're highbrow and lowbrow, they do couture, but they also had a line for Target, and they're, Kate and Laura Molevi, and they just seem like they really like each other, and they can do their own things, but they collaborate. And also Beyonce and Solange, I think I admire them.
Yes, very much. But I feel I don't know. Kath is the one who thinks in the big picture. I don't know that I ever think of myself in any kind of terms like that. I just kind of see Kathleen as a writer. I like her. She's very talented. We happen to be
Thank you.
related, and I have access to this amazing, talented sister. So, you know, we've always kind of like bounced ideas off of each other, and kind of we got married on the same day, and like that led to some great work for Kathleen, and some like starting. Yeah, that it's a wonderful, wonderful book, and I feel like it's the subject of a question that you had. But yeah, Kat's really good at those high level questions. I don't think like that.
Yes, I actually was introduced to both the Rooney sisters in this one collection of poetry, One Eye Romance, about their double wedding. Was it in Niagara Falls?
Yeah, there's a Niagara Falls section and Brazil and the Midwest, because like it was kind of the wedding that ate 2005, because we both happened to fall in love and find our like forever person at the same time, and we didn't know what we wanted to do wedding wise. And then it occurred to us, because we had this great uncle who's now dead, but he lived a great life, who had been a bishop in Brazil for years and years. So we were like, what if we go to Brazil and have Alfredo do the ceremony, because bishops never get to do that, and he's lived his whole life away from the family. And we went and we spent a month down there before the wedding, just getting to know him as an adult, which was so cool. And just getting to see the work that he did and like meet all the different people and see all the charities. And so, yeah, it just ended up, Beth took a million photos. I wrote a bunch of poems. So across the book, you know, you see us like at Niagara Falls, you see us in Brazil, you see us in the Midwest, because we got married, both of us, back home in the States and then in Brazil. So it was like the eyes of the law and the eyes of the Lord, because everyone told us like Brazil's great, but they're not known for their like meticulous paperwork. So that we needed to get like the paper in the States and then just do the big shenanigan in Brazil. So it worked out.
Yes.
This is one of my favorite books ever. It's the winner of the 2007 Gatewood Prize, which is an award given to, is it first book by a woman poet, Kathleen?
Yep.
And as Beth said, it really does deal with women's issues, especially women on the brink of getting married. As the introduction written by Patty Sayburn says, the subject of the book is obviously marriage and its sidecar issues: commitment, tradition, responsibility, fidelity, complacency. And you, Kathleen, just deal with those issues in the most lyrical and sometimes surreal, just so imagistic way. I'm sorry, I'm kind of hijacking Josh's questions, but
I'm good.
But and it says also in the introduction that for her visual component, Rooney turns to her sister Beth, a photographer, present in many of the poems. They are a pair of brides. Beth, did you write the poems from Beth's photographs? Or
yeah, totally. It was
a collaboration of a sort.
Yeah. I like referred to the photos so many times. I mean, it was such a rich experience. And it felt like a dream in the sense that it was so like chunked out and removed from like our normal life. And so, we had the experience and it was so intense, but of course that book didn't come out till 2008, which is like 3 years later. And so as I was doing it, and then also even for like our Midwestern wedding, the photos were like immensely helpful. So yes.
Well, yeah, it definitely has that quality. It's very cinematic, and kudos to both of you on that accomplishment. Back to you, Josh.
I'm wondering if you have other siblings and whether or not those siblings are artists.
Yeah, we have one younger sister. So there's 3 of us. We're a trifecta. And I think we're pretty classic birth order. I'm the oldest. So I'm like super type A, overachiever. Beth's the middle child who gets along with everyone. Is super fun. And then our younger sister, Megan, is sort of like the wayward younger child. So she lives out in Philadelphia and she works at Drexel University. So she's, I would say she's creative, but she's not like, I don't think she would self-apply the label of artist.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And our parents are both pharmacists. So I don't really, my mom was super curious, very like we always had National Geographic. Like she wanted to be an archaeologist for a while. So like, and she's always very good at drawing and could sing really well, but she didn't really pursue that. And our dad was just like super hardworking, like classic like dad. So I think that's where Kath gets her like intense work ethic. And it's really amazing how much she can get done. I think, having parents with more traditional jobs and then having that creative bent, but with that traditional idea of working hard, not like the flaky artist, I think is why we've been able to do what we do.
Yeah, for sure. And I think both in terms of like the business side of things, I think I always admire about Beth how you're like a sort of like a lone photographer and you're like a freelancer. And so you have to you are a business, you have to manage your own business and, just keep all of that, like keep your own books and do your taxes and things like that. And I think, I run Rose Metal Press, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, which of course everyone who runs a nonprofit knows does not mean like a no profit or does not mean that like we don't care about money. And I think, I'm grateful for that upbringing. Like flakiness was never going to be an option. It was always like, it doesn't matter what you are, you have to kind of like get your business in order. So it's paid off.
Yeah, exactly. Be the best at what you're going to do. So yeah.
I wonder if there's anything that you wish people would ask, but never do, or never seem quite brave enough to ask about what it's like to be siblings who make things.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I think like it doesn't apply to this situation, but I think people often I think it's just the culture, like the cultural sea that we swim in, questions of like jealousy or competition. And instead I like questions about like collaboration, which obviously we've already gotten some lovely ones here. So this, present company is excluded, but I think it's always interesting that, maybe because of, I don't know. I think especially sisters, I think especially in a culture that it's more interesting plot wise to have like an envy situation or like a cat fight. But I prefer the like collaborative questions.
It's almost like a desire on the part of the asker to cast you in roles from a fairy tale.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to throw the energy back Lissa's way and let her ask some questions now. But thank you so very much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh.
Yes.
Fabulous. Well, I'd like to talk to you about how you define success as an artist. We've already talked about, through Beth's series, how do you fit your practice in? Although Kathleen hasn't spoken to that yet, and I'm amazed by how much you do. But first, let's start with the idea of success. You're both very successful in my mind, having written for big, news outlets and, published widely, won awards. How about you? How do you define success? Kathleen?
Yeah, I love that question. Of course, I would be completely lying if I said I didn't want people to read my work, or I didn't want it to appear in outlets where a large number of people that I do not know, strangers could find and engage with it. I definitely want that. But I think while that's an element of success, I think for me, I just think a lot about trying not to locate success outside of myself or not put success in the hands of people who don't have to give me anything or could take it away. And so I think for me, it sounds maybe corny, but I think it's true. Like success is just being able to like have fun and pursue projects that interest me. I just think, I don't know, I know not all writers feel this way. And some writers are like, it's like cutting a vein and bleeding on the page. And if that's anyone here, different strokes for different folks. But like, to me, it's like so freaking fun. Like when I hear people say that, I'm like, oh no, you should stop. That sounds awful. I just have so much fun. Like I'm never having so much fun as when I'm just like amusing myself with my own little writings. Like, I mean, maybe that's vain, but I like write something and it's funny and I'm like cracking myself up. I'm like, oh hell yeah, this is so good. And then also collaborating. Like I love literary citizenship and I love doing Poems While You Wait. So I don't think of success as just being like a lone writer who's like climbing to the top of some pyramid. But I think for me, I feel most successful when I'm hanging out with other writers and we're doing something as a team, or when I'm like talking to Abby, my co-editor, my partner on the press, and we're like helping to put together like a great book design for a new writer. So I guess like fun, like too long didn't read version, success to me is like having fun.
I love that answer. I feel the same. Having just started this nonprofit, in the nonprofit world, a lot of people take themselves very seriously. And really, I started it to collaborate and have fun. So there it is. So I'm glad that you've validated my motivation.
Heck yeah.
How about you, Beth? How do you define success?
I think it's a very similar definition, like being able to do what you enjoying your Tuesday, enjoying your random Thursday afternoon, doing something that you care about. And working together with Kathleen, we've started collaborating on these little short stories for kids. And it's the most fun. It's like the best. And we collaborated on a piece for the New York Times that was published December of 2020. And it was so fun. I was so scared when Kat, she was like, we should do this together. I was like, I don't know if this is a story. I don't know. And then I was like, I don't think I'm good enough to write with you. Because, and then she was like, no, it's going to be great. And then it totally was. And it was super easy. And it was like the best. And then, since then we've, continued collaborating, and it's always very fun, really easy. And that to me is like what you want your creative process to be, is fun. And something you just want to keep doing. And the world of photo it's changing, but it was very like lone wolfy, and you are kind of on your own. And like, it's a very strange place for a young woman to try to be successful without compromise or there's a lot of like weird predatory males in the photo world, and it's changing, but it has taken a long time. So I was never one to wanna hang out with other photographers because I was always a little leery of their intentions. But that's changing, like I said, and it's definitely getting easier to collaborate and not have to take that kind of behavior anymore, which is good.
Yeah, well, yes, I think we all know that stereotype of the male photographer who's, preying on women. Can I take your picture? You're so beautiful. I want to photograph you.
Yes.
And having worked a little bit, my husband's a photographer and videographer. Having worked a little bit, we met at a video company in that field. It was very flirty at the time. I wouldn't say, I had any experiences that were predatory, but what about you, Beth?
Immediately, like as soon as I was at university, the man who was in charge of the program ended up being dismissed because he had inappropriate relationships with students.
Oh my goodness. And what year was that?
This was 2004. And then, like David Allen Harvey is this amazing National Geographic photographer who's now been kicked out of his agency because he was predatory, and everyone knew it. Everyone knew it when he came down to speak at my university and did inappropriate things. And it was just something it was just like part of the deal, and like you just kind of were told like, well, this is what you're going to have to put up with if you want to be a successful photographer. And it was like super hard. And I was on the Obama campaign, and not for his campaign. I was photographing in 2007, documenting the whole process of Iowa. And there were a lot of people that wanted to take advantage of young women photographers. And it was discouraging, but like, I didn't want to like quit doing it and have that power taken from me too, like something that I love not being something I'm comfortable with. So for a long time, I really didn't do a lot of collaborative work. And I was very choosy about who I would reach out to when I was in New York. But it was kind of like an open secret forever. But again, it's changing slowly but surely, like 20 years later.
Right. At a glacier's pace, but thank goodness it is changing. And, your experiences far, predated the Me Too movement. But certainly that's been just seismic and
Yes.
upending this sort of behavior, which is
Mhm.
fantastic. Great. Well, I think it's the point. We've got about 9 minutes left. If it's okay with you, Kathleen and Beth, that we could take questions from
Yeah.
comments from our lovely
Yeah.
audience members. If you'd like to unmute everybody, feel free. And if you have any questions, why don't we just, Lily, yes, you've got your hand up.
I think this is mostly a question for Kathleen, but both of you, please feel free to answer this. I was just wondering if you have any, I'm going to school for writing, that's why I'm saying that it's mostly a question for Kathleen, but if you have like advice for the younger generation of writers, what you would say.
Yeah, great question. I love that because I teach at DePaul. I love being a professor of creative writing. And I think, the thing that I emphasize, and I know it's been hard with the pandemic, but I think we're, at the point where we're like learning to deal with it. I think stuff like this, online and in person, like going to stuff, meeting people, you could see it as networking if you wanted to, but I think for me, it is and it's helpful to think of it as like community building and connection building. And just, I think a lot of times seeing like the field of writing, not just as like this hierarchy where you're trying to like appeal to the gatekeepers at the top, but realizing that it's really kind of an ecosystem. So there's like, less of a pyramid and more like lily pads on a pond, and like lateral moves and lateral connections are good too. And then I think also like sort of getting yourself out there by like reaching out to people and kind of like offering to interview them for a literary magazine or like doing a review for a literary magazine. I'm careful to advocate too much unpaid labor because I feel like artists should ideally be compensated, but realistically, they're not always compensated. And then I also, the flip side of that coin, feel like I don't want to live in a world where the only value is the value of money. So I think, every artist has to negotiate that for themselves, how much like free work, or how much other valued work they want to do. But I think that can be a great way to kind of like connect with some of your like mentors or like people who like maybe you haven't met but consider a mentor just because you love their work. And then you also get your byline, and then you sort of start doing this whole like literary citizenship thing and like becoming an open node that connects across the system. And I think, I don't know, that's a way to keep it fun, but also keep yourself like standing a chance to achieve that like externally determined success too, which like I said, I can't lie. I like both.
Need it, yeah.
Great.
Great question. Other questions?
Margaret?
Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to ask you both, as being women artists, and you have the same mother. So how has having that same mother influenced your work as an artist? You're becoming an artist, you're part of your dialogue maybe with each other about the challenges or the gifts or you have the same mother, and mother is role model, and I see that Beth, you have the pictures of, being a mother, how important that is to you, and that role and that activity. And then also you had in your book, a story about being with your mother on your mother's lap and realizing sort of differences about how she felt and you felt. So anyway, I just think it's a interesting topic, like you have the same mother. That's really something.
Yeah, I'll let Beth, you go first.
Well, I think we both have obviously very different relationships with our mom, given just our own personalities, and then the fact that I am a mother and Kathleen is an awesome aunt, and has just a very different experience of in our adult lives. I think I'm kind of struggling with this question. I think my mom was always very open in some ways and very closed in other ways. And I think the worlds I explore in photo and the topics I explore with my photos have to do with the fact that our mom was pretty emotionally closed. She was very prim and proper. I mean, Kath I know you can disagree, but I think
you're right.
She was not always very emotive or demonstrative. And like, I explore the idea of family, the idea of connections, and what a different, like I have another series about the Zope family circus, and kind of exploring what that is to live and work and be a family together. And I'm fascinated by that because our family never felt that close. Like we just, I mean, except for me and Kath, like I would say, we were very, very close always. But our family was just not very open. So I think my work is a direct response to that closed feeling. I want to be open and explore, and I'm always like tickling my kids and kissing them because I didn't get that. So I want to make sure it's like different.
Yeah, no, our parents were super like hardworking, like Catholic people, and it was about like more like getting your work done than like talking about your feelings. And I think we both kind of reacted to that in our own ways. And I would say, to the extent that external success matters most to me, like I just want my parents to be proud of me. So I still, even I'm 41 years old, and I'm still like, it just means like the best thing is when I like post an achievement on Facebook, and then my mom is like, good job. And then she calls me and she's like, I saw you did a thing. And I'm just like, yes, I just want my mom to love me.
Did she say that you did a thing?
Yeah. I mean, she'll be like, I saw a thing. What is, I don't really, you know, and then I explain it. And then, I mean, she's always, she's like, tell me about it, you know?
Yeah.
And on that note, I guess, you know, we've got only a few minutes left, unless there are further questions, and I'm going to scan for hands. My last question is, what are your artistic goals for the future?
I think our biggest goal right now, I mean, Beth, you can, you know, disagree, but like Beth mentioned, we wrote this thing for the New York Times last December, and an agent reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to try our hand at writing picture books for kids. And so we were like, sure, why not? You know, like maybe it'll go somewhere. We hope so. So yeah, so I think ideally we're both kind of rooting for our agent Gwen to, you know, help us publish our kids' books. And in the meantime, we're just having a good time writing these little stories for kids because it's like a fun audience.
Yeah, it is fun. I think that's true. I agree completely. Kids' books, and then you just finished a project. I'm trying to find a home for Gray. So just that continued collaboration.
Yeah.
But you know, you make an interesting point.
Thank you.
Getting an agent is not an easy task. So the agent reached out to you after
That's right.
seeing your work in the
Yeah.
time.
That's right.
That's really
It was
important.
awesome.
Yeah, it was crazy. Totally unexpected, but a beautiful reaction.
Yeah.
And hopefully a fruitful one. That's been really, really fun. So hopefully you all will be able to read some silly children's books soon.
Yeah. Send vibes, send acceptance vibes.
I think we all will. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
coming. This is awesome. Thank you for spending some of your Thursday with us. We appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's great.